Hello everybody and welcome back to more political chatter. In this video we will be talking about Donald Trump's, the Republican nominee for president, his absolute best case scenario in the 2024 presidential election. Now, before I get into anything, I'll mind you this is not a prediction video. I have those videos separate for a reason, but this is the best possible scenario for Donald Trump. This is his in the alternate universe where he wins by the most. This is it. This is how Donald Trump wins the 2024 presidential election by the most. So he is already on track to win the 2024 election, right? I mean, when you look at nationwide polling, Trump leads by 4.3 in the Kennedy versus Biden versus Trump matchup, when on this day in history, March 18th in 2020, Biden led by 6.4. So that is a 9.9% swing towards the Republicans, swing towards the left, which is just absolutely unheard of in American politics. I mean, in such short 4 years, and considering that, how far right this polling has shifted in favor of Donald Trump, he is definitely on track to win the 2024 election over Joe Biden. But looking at the each state individually, he can do even better than that on the popular vote level. And this is Donald Trump's best possible scenario. So first of all, we have four characterizations for our states. That being, we could characterize it as tilt, that being less than 1% margin, lean being a 1 to 5% margin, likely being a 5 to 15% margin, and safe being a margin of victory over 15%. So obviously, the 2024 election is going to shift towards the Republicans, towards Donald Trump. It's going to be more Republican than 2020, regardless. But in the best case scenario, obviously, every state basically will swing towards the Republicans. So that means that every state that he won by a safe margin in 2020, over 15%, will stay with him. I mean, this is just common sense. So that includes, I may have to go back to this map, forgive me if I do, that includes Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska at large, Nebraska's first district, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, and West Virginia. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. Okay, Missouri was also a safe Republican state, and that is it. So that would put Donald Trump at 106 electoral votes. Now, of course, there will still be safe states for Joe Biden. I mean, even in Donald Trump's best case scenario, he is not going to chip away all that much at these ultra Democratic states. That's, California voted for him by over 29%. Washington, well, that one is not a good example to use, I guess, because that one was below 20%. But Massachusetts voted for Biden by over 33%. Delaware, closer than I expected, 19%. Maryland, 33%. So we do have a couple core Democratic states that, even in the best case scenario for Donald Trump, he is just not really getting anywhere near. I know all of you are going to hate me in the comments for this, but he is not coming close in Hawaii. Joe Biden is winning the state of Hawaii by over 15%. And the Maui wildfires are not going to change the outcome of the 2024 election here. That's not something we need to focus on, even in Donald Trump's best case scenario. California, also not getting below that 15%. Threshold to be a safe state. Definitely the state of Maryland, considering its 2020 margin. Massachusetts, considering its 2020 margin. Vermont, considering its 2020 margin. Those would be the core Democratic states. Let me just check in on Rhode Island. That went to Biden by 20. I could definitely see a reality where that does get below 15%. So I will hold off on calling that safe. And that would wrap it up for the best case scenario for Donald Trump after the safe states for Joe Biden. But we could actually probably add, yeah, can definitely add some safe states to the Trump column in his best case scenario. That being, looking at a state like South Carolina that voted for him by about 12% in 2020. It will probably be safe now in 2024, regardless, even in Donald Trump's, in his not best case scenario, whatever. In the normal scenario, it's on track to go down in November of this year. Donald Trump will still probably swing South Carolina a few points to the right, but especially in his best case scenario, that's probably going to be a safe state. And then you've got a state like Alaska. They have ranked choice voting here, so I don't know how that could affect it. But he won it by 10 in 2020. I think that in his very best case scenario, he could definitely swing that enough to the right to make it safe. Kansas, obviously, that's going to be that's happening even not in his best case scenario. That will be a safe state. And then you've got Ohio, Iowa. These are tough to call. But honestly, when you look at polling, I know in Iowa we do have some polling from Ann Selzer, which is like the most respected name in polling with the One Register, famous for their poll released right before the Iowa caucus that's always spot on. Donald Trump leads by 15%. That would be a safe margin. So I think that it is in the realm of possibility, but especially in Trump's best case scenario, that he actually does win the state of Iowa by a safe margin. In Nebraska's second district, he won it by just under 15% in 2020. So obviously, that one will be safe for him in 2024. And then there was a really interesting poll from Maine's second congressional district where he won in 2020 by 7.4. But you can see how they really stayed with him from 2016 to 2020, while the rest of the country shifted dramatically to the left. Main second went to him in 2016 by 10.3, in 2020 by 7.4, so it didn't shift to the left all that much. There was a poll released recently that had him up by like 22%, something astonishing. So I do think that, of course, in Trump's best case scenario, that he could win the state or the district of Maine second. Now, Ohio is tough. Looking at some polling numbers that we have here, Donald Trump does lead by a likely margin in every single poll against Biden. Obviously, these are not best case scenarios for Donald Trump. But I mean, looking at polling from 2020, it was expected to be an incredibly close race. Unfortunately, you can't see the final number there. But going right before Election Day, it looked like it was about 47 to 47. It looks like it's like 47 to 46 right before Election Day. That's what polling was predicting. But in 2020, it ended up being Trump plus 8. So I could actually see, Biden was heavily overestimated in Ohio polling in 2020, as Hillary was in 2016 over Trump. So if this polling is this 2024 polling is anything like it was in 2020, then I could definitely see a reality where Trump is heavily underestimated as he was in 2020, and that Ohio is actually a safe state for him, astonishingly. Texas and Florida, those are tough. I really don't think that there is a possibility where Trump does somehow win it by a safe margin. I would not be comfortable doing that as of now. So now we move on to likely states. So those are all of our safe states. That puts Donald Trump at a big lead of 149 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 82 and Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s. I do always make sure to include him because he is such an important factor in this 2024 election. Kennedy at 0. Now we move on to the likely states. As I said, margin between 5 and 15% for the respective parties. So we'll start with Donald Trump. So, as I mentioned before, Texas and Florida would honestly be somewhat close to being a safe margin in Donald Trump's best case scenario when you look at 2020. Texas voted for him by 5.6%, and Florida voted for him by 3.4%. So, both of these states have extremely high Latino voter populations, and Latinos as you probably have heard, are trending towards the Republican Party in such high numbers, like never seen before. And that really is an interesting factor in this 2024 election. So, in Trump's best case scenario, he will definitely get out those Latino voters. And really, he will, in a best case scenario, he would really be able to run up his numbers in the state of Texas. Looking at polling right now, as for Texas, um, it's not too overwhelming for Donald Trump, and that is why I didn't put it as a safe state. Up +9, up +8, um, up by 4, up by 4. So it's not too, astonishing for Trump. So I would put Texas as likely right now in his best case scenario. Obviously, he increases that win from 2020. And then looking at Florida, um, Florida is interesting because Biden was slightly overestimated in 2020, not a whole lot, and we're about to look at it here. If I could find the state, here it is. So as well, I guess we'll look at 2020 first. Biden led on election day by a few points. It was about here we could see. But on average, here we see a very wide range of polls. But on average, on election day or the day before election day, Biden led by 2.5% in the state of Florida, and Trump ended up winning it by 3.5, basically 3.4%, 3.5 percentage points. So that was a 5-point overestimation for Biden in the state of Florida. And when you look at 2020, Trump leads by 6, Trump leads by 11. So definitely varying in the margin here. Trump leads by 10, Trump leads by 7. But I think it would be far too drastic or outlandish or whatever fictional to say that even in Donald Trump's best case scenario he wins Florida. I would put it at a likely margin at this point. Donald Trump won the state of North Carolina in 2020. He won it by just 1.3%. This was the closest of any of the states that he won. It was a very narrow margin. Democrats focused on this state. Um, and, this is definitely one that will shift towards the Republicans, especially when you look at polling here. Polling is looking very good for Trump and the Republicans in North Carolina. Trump leads by 5, by 14. Now that one, it's not really an outlier. We have one where he leads by 10 and one where he leads by 12 and 14 and 9. So it's not too outlandish. But I honestly think that 14 is his like absolute maximum vote total that he could get. When you look at all the polls, it does come down to more of a 8-9 point margin. So even in his best case scenario, he wouldn't really quite be able to get to that 15%. And North Carolina does stay a likely state for Donald Trump. Now we might go back to some likely Republican states, but now as for the Democrats, I will just fill in their map for a little bit. Being very realistic as we always are here on the channel. Make sure to subscribe, by the way. Biden won Illinois by 17%. He's not getting down below that 5% margin. He's not losing 12% of that margin, or not 12% of the margin, but he's not losing 12% of his 2020 support. So I would put in Donald Trump's best case scenario, he will definitely get it down at least to a likely margin. In Delaware, it went to Joe Biden by 19% in 2020. In Trump's best case scenario, he will definitely be able to get that down. In New Jersey, Biden won by only over 15%, 15.9. So Trump will absolutely be able to come down on that. Connecticut, in Rhode Island, Connecticut, Biden won by 20. He won Rhode Island by 20.8. He could, chip away quite a few points in these two states to make them likely, but not 15. That is too outlandish. Even in Donald Trump's best case scenario, there's no reality where Connecticut and New Jersey and Delaware and Rhode Island get below 15%. Maine's first congressional district, that's a likely margin win for Trump in his best case scenario. Biden won it by 23. I might even be generous on that. That's an 8-point shift. I'm probably not, really. And then you have the state of New York, which is a very interesting state. Heading into the 2024 election, because this was such a Democratic state. It was seen as such a Democratic state for so long. I mean, just to remind you, Chuck Schumer won the state of New York in his Senate campaign in 2016. He won with 70% of the vote. 70. And 2 years ago, in 2022, the incumbent Democratic governor, Kathy Hochul, won re-election by 5%, which is about what? I got, including third-party candidates, that's probably about 51.5%, 51 to 52%. I don't know the exact number. So you are really seeing this trend towards the Republicans in the state of New York. Now, Kathy Hochul was an extremely weak candidate, and she hurt Democrats down ballot. So I'm not really comparing Biden directly to Kathy Hochul, but this one is New York is no longer a Maryland. It is no longer a California where we never need to talk about it. Trump is actually targeting New York. I don't know if that's a good strategy, considering that that there are better ways to use your resources in a presidential campaign. But New York undoubtedly is shifting blue, and in the best case scenario, Donald Trump can probably get New York down to a 6, 7, or 8% margin. Um, Now, moving on. Let's see. Colorado did go to Biden by 13 in 2024. In a normal scenario, Biden actually does probably outpace this. Colorado is trending heavily towards the Democrats. So honestly, in Trump's best case scenario, I would keep this as a likely state. I'm sure many would probably disagree with me on that. Biden won New Mexico by 10. Trump can definitely get it more narrow than that, I think. And then you've got Washington and Oregon. So Washington, Biden won by about 19%. I don't really think that Trump can, chip away 14%. So I would put Washington best case scenario is likely for Biden. And that does wrap up the likely states for the Democrats. As for the Republicans, I would argue that there is at least, quite a few actually, more states that could fall under the likely Republican characterization, most prominently being the state of Georgia. Georgia voted for Joe Biden by 0.2%, and this polling from 2020 actually overestimated Donald Trump here. And but just looking at this polling, let's head over to Georgia now. In 2024, Donald Trump leads by heavy margins, much heavier than he did in 2020, I believe at least. So Biden actually led more polls than I remembered. But when Donald Trump did lead them, it was by 4, by 2, by 1, by 3, and then Biden led quite a few polls. And Biden ended up winning the state of Georgia. But looking at 2024, Donald Trump now leads every single poll. This one is against Haley, in case we have a commenter who says that, and he leads by quite a lot. 3. I guess that one's not so good, but 7, 6, 4, 7, 9, 6, 8, 8. So he's doing much, much, much better in the state of Georgia than in 2020, and really with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the race this time around, with Kennedy really clearly chipping away African American support from Joe Biden, I think that Donald Trump can definitely win the state of Georgia by a likely margin. And I just realized I forgot a obviously safe Democratic state no matter what, Washington, D.C. Sorry, not a state, a district. But they do have 3 electoral votes. And then you come to the state of Wisconsin, a state that voted for Biden in 2020 by less than a percentage point, just like Georgia, 0.6%. And when you look at polling, and this was even more apparent in 2016, but unfortunately, we do not have polls on this website from 2016. You see in 2020 that Biden was estimated to win the state by 8.4% right before Election Day. 8.4. He ended up winning, as I said, by 0.6. So looking at 2024 polling now, if we use that same logic, hypothetically, Donald Trump is now leading every single poll in the state of Wisconsin by 9, or that's against Newsom, sorry, by 4, by 3, by 2, by 4, by 6. He, if he's being underestimated as, or even as, anywhere near as much as he was in 2020, Trump would have no problem in his best case scenario carrying the state of Wisconsin by a likely margin. Um, the Now this is where states can get very tough. And Nevada, honestly, I do think could go to him by a likely margin, and that's a flip from 2020. Nevada, Biden won Nevada by 2.4%. But looking at 2024, I mean, there was the New York Times poll showed Trump winning Nevada by 12. Now, I think that's outlandish. I don't even think in his best case scenario Trump could win it by 12. But you get the idea. I mean, here we have Latino voters, again, as I mentioned, really trending towards the Republicans in tremendous numbers. Michigan and Pennsylvania really are tough. But I mean, again, this is not a prediction. This is Donald Trump's best case scenario. And looking at Biden's very small win, especially in Pennsylvania, by 1.2%, and then in Michigan by 2.8%, he was really heavily overestimated in both of these states in 2020. But just looking at 2024 polling, Trump leads by 4, Trump leads by 4, by 2. This is a poll against Haley. That's insane. By 20, by 5, by 2. So looking at polling, polling was pretty accurate in this state. In 2020, you might have even overestimated Biden. Yeah, so overestimated him by a few points. So I think that it would be completely possible in Trump's best case scenario that he wins Pennsylvania by a likely margin, especially considering that he won it back in 2016. And Michigan, I mean, honestly, same thing. In the best case scenario, Biden won it by 2.8. Looking at 2024 polling, I mean, if Biden led by 8 in 2020, according to polls, and now this time around, Trump leads literally every single poll in the state by 5, by 3, by 4, by 2, by 10, by 4, by 2, by 1, then it looks apparent, actually, that Trump would carry the state of Michigan, probably not, or by a likely margin, maybe not even in his best case scenario. So we have a couple more states. Arizona, in his best case scenario, is probably a likely margin win. When you really consider it, um, I mean, this one's tough. I mean, again, this is his best case scenario. In my current prediction, I have him winning it by a lean margin. So in his very, very, very best case scenario, it is completely in the realm of possibility that he would be able to win Arizona by more than 5%. I mean, sure, it was basically just about even in 2020. Biden won it by 0.3%. So in 2024, definitely Trump could shift this state 5 points towards the right, especially looking at all of these other states that I've already characterized. So that puts Trump at 312. Biden at 183, 270 are needed to win the presidency, by the way. So obviously Donald Trump has already exceeded that threshold to become president. But now we move on to lean states. So these states will be decided by a 1 to 5% by their respective candidate. So let's start with that. We'll start with Biden, I guess, this time, and we'll start with the state of Oregon. If not lean, likely the state isn't getting any closer than a 3% margin. But I do think that this state really could, in Donald Trump's best case scenario, this is a state that really could, really shift towards Donald Trump this time around, as compared to other states that I've characterized. Because it is a trending right state. I mean, we saw in the gubernatorial election in 2022, the Republican for governor, Christine Drazan, come really, really close, just a few percentage points away from beating the Democrat for governor. But again, this is a very trending right state, and Democrats are just very unpopular in the state. I mean, their state leadership, the governor, the Democrat governor is unpopular, and the governor before her was a Democrat, was also extremely unpopular. So I don't know. I could definitely just see Oregon more than other states getting below a 5% margin for some reason. In New Mexico, Biden won by 10.8 in 2020, so I do think that it is reasonable to say that Trump could get it below 5%, shift it 5 points to the right. I don't think that in my actual prediction, but in his best case scenario, he probably does it. But I mean, it's not like he's trending it over 10 points. Not a state like New Mexico, at least. So that stays lean. Um, and let's see. Maine second is very interesting because we did have one single poll released that actually showed Trump up by 6 in the statewide election in Maine. But that is one single poll. I don't think that he could do that even in his best case scenario. But I do think that a lean margin win is completely possible, especially if he does run up his numbers in the second district and Biden falls behind in the first district. I also think that winning New Hampshire would, by a lean margin, by almost 5%, would happen in his best case scenario. I mean, this state really trended to the left in from 2016 to 2020, and that is because there are a lot of open-minded centrist independent voters in New Hampshire. So a lot of people willing to change their minds. And in Trump's best case scenario, he is able to convince a lot of these independent voters in New Hampshire that he is the far better choice than Biden or Kennedy. Now, Kennedy will also run up his numbers in an independent state like New Hampshire. That, I would think, probably hurts Biden more, considering New Hampshire's partisan lead towards the Democrats. Naturally, he would take more away from Biden. So, considering that Biden won it by 7, even though that is significant, I think that New Hampshire, more than any other state, or not any other state, but more than most states, would be prone to shifting to the right a bit more. The second congressional district, that could definitely be a lean state. Biden won it by 6.6 in 2020, so he could, uh, you know, I mean, realistically, in his best case scenario, Trump could, win it by a point or so. I don't know. But probably not tilt, I'd say. And that would wrap up lean states. So now we have 2 states remaining, Minnesota and Virginia. Trump is at 319 to Biden's 196. And Kennedy 0. And Donald Trump's best case scenario, his very best scenario, I think that he does win the state of Minnesota, and that is because in 2016 he came very, very close. Hillary Clinton only won the state by 1.5%, so obviously he has the ability to come really close in the state. But looking at 2020, Biden won it by 7.1, a healthy margin. I will definitely say that Minnesota is definitely winning Minnesota for a Democrat by 7.1 is definitely a healthy margin. But I do think that it is close enough where Donald Trump could shift it, just over 7 points to the right to make it a below 1% win. Again, this is his, very best case scenario. I mean, if we look at polls from Minnesota, not Mississippi, from Minnesota in 2020, Biden was expected to win by 9.2, so that is a 2-point overestimation. So, looking at 2024, Biden leads by about, on average, like about 4, it looks like. So, -2, and then in his best case scenario, he picks up 5, so, who knows. In the very best case scenario, Minnesota would go to Trump. And then Virginia, I'm very torn on because even though it is, only a 10-point win for Biden, it's really, I'm having trouble explaining this. But in simple terms, there are quite a few staunchly anti-Trump Republicans and independents. This is just naturally a more anti-Trump state than any other state. I mean, Nikki Haley performed somewhat well here compared to her other state um, showings, and that is because we have more upper class better educated, more wealthy. I don't know if I said that. Voters, more traditional, more Reagan-like Republicans and Independents and Democrats who have turned their backs on Trump since the 2016 election. I mean, remember, Hillary Clinton won the state by 5 when the blue wall, known for always voting Democratic, fell to the Republicans. But Virginia stayed strong for Hillary Clinton, and that is because, just because of the DMV area, the District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, this area, we have very wealthy, well educated voters who are just naturally anti Trump. So, because of that, even in his best case scenario, I don't think Donald Trump could possibly win the state of Virginia. I would give it to Joe Biden. So that finishes the electoral map in Donald Trump's very best case scenario. Donald Trump wins with 329 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 209. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out a lot. Leave a like and leave a comment. I really enjoy reading all your comments, even though I disagree with many. I still love that all the attention that this channel has been getting recently. So thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all next time.